Lake Mind Sky, the diary of a progressive rock musician. I woke up on a hillside in Dorset. Was it already afternoon? I don't recall what had brought me here, nor what had happened last night. I'd just taken the bus into town and was going to meet up with some friends at a pub. That's all I remember. A scent, a sound, a girl. Who was it? Was it Priscilla or Laura? Maybe Anna. Or was it that strange one who was new to the neighborhood? She was the girl who hung out near the jukebox but didn't really talk to anyone while sipping a beer slowly, like it was just a social prop. And her eyes, they didn't see through you, they were you. And in her glance and then stare, there was no emotion, nothing that would induce romantic or sensual feelings. In this void empty of normal sensation, a horizon arose, a blue reflection of Earth, or what seemed to be. You could say that she was the most beautiful young woman at the pub, perfectly symmetrical facial feature, a figure delicate nymph-like. Nevertheless, she didn't arouse lust. Her physical body was merely the launch pad, but her ethereal presence the rocket, a wholesome, accelerating energy that probes your hidden thoughts, then made you soar. That's the best way I can describe her. She engaged in normal small talk, and if she hadn't been so charming, she'd seem almost robotic. The conversations would fade, but those around her were not left with a discomforting silence, but a glowing calm, like after taking a first hit off a joint. Anyway, I was lying down in a field, this field a kilometer from my home. I had my wallet on me and a pack of cigarettes, keys, and a flyer for a band that had apparently played at the pub last night. Written on the back, 2 3 girls' phone numbers. Wiping my lip, there was a speck of lipstick. Who had I been with during that nocturnal adventure, of which I have no memory? As cars whizzed down the country road, I stuck my thumb out, hoping to hitch a ride, appearing rather disheveled, I suppose because no one stopped, so I just walked the rest of the way home. It seemed to take forever. Towering over town were billowy cumulus clouds. It seemed like a welcome banner, signaling where I was destined on that unusually buoyant early spring day, warmer than I'd ever experienced in my 18 years. I entered our little house, a quaint edifice replete with a typical English garden and 2 large trees. Mum greeted me with that knowing smile, scolding me gently, but not letting me go up to my room until I had had a fry up of eggs, beans, toast, chips, and tomatoes. After listening to me recounting my previous evening, mostly a bland retelling of my normal Friday routine, she alerted me to the fact that John, the keyboardist in our band, had called. Oh, damn, I'd have to rehearse today, and he was a real stickler for detail. Every note, beat, nuance had to be redone, perfected. I was the lead guitarist, songwriter, and second vocalist. Even my songs had to be rewritten to satisfy the group's democratic collective. Our band was called Cloud Ship, and we'd been around for a year now on the Southern English club circuit. Surrey, Exeter, Portsmouth, Brighton, sometimes over to Cornwall and Wales. We played the typical covers bands played in 1996, but were venturing into more experimental psychedelic songs and even into Renaissance music. As well, we'd often embellish our tunes with Baroque structures, going from counterpoint to jazz stylings, but not too much as we didn't want to overdo it. We'd give the audience a taste here and there to keep things interesting, and vignette the melodies with unusual colors. After hopping up the creaky wood staircase, I plopped myself in my bed underneath the poster of James Bond and lay staring at at the ceiling, trying to imagine how next Wednesday's gig would turn out. We had 5 covers and 6 originals. I always thought our tributes were ridiculous, but our pub dance hall patrons always were turned on by hearing familiar songs or obscure, unheard, rhythm and blues selections. Something that sounded like something, but not exactly. In any case, they enjoyed it enough to be tolerant of our original endeavors, no matter how esoteric. Pondering our last gig, I realized we'd have to merge together more effectively with our vocal harmonies. I shared singing duties with Mike, our lead singer, essentially, and John would add some backing vocals, but it was all rather tame and we needed to project more clearly vocally if it were to become a major signature of our band. And I knew we could do it. I got my acoustic guitar out and started strumming a new tune I'd been working on, strumming chords and picking out melodic arpeggios and riffs. I supplemented the song with increased tempo to give it some energy, which Thomas, our drummer, would also add to. The lyrics were dumb. Well, what would I know at 18? I definitely needed to refine the word order and choice. Maybe I'd ask Thomas, who was a poetry buff, when he wasn't out kicking a football or bashing on his drums. He'd won a high school poetry contest with Green Lemonade for the Queen, a somewhat humorous poke at psychedelia, royalty, and trite romanticism. In any case, I took a bus, but this was after pondering that we were searching for a band that was somewhat cliche in an artistic, if not musical sense. Some would claim our band was pretentious. I always thought we were creating something new. And besides, what great cultural knowledge would our younger audience even be able to comprehend anyway? So I took a bus to an adjacent small town where we, John, Thomas, Mike, and I, set up our practice den in Thomas's basement. His parents were accommodating to our aspirations and let us use this space for equipment storage, loud practice sessions all day, and sometimes even little parties for our friends on the periphery of our special world. John on keys presented his latest riff, a song motif on his Hammond organ. Would it be okay to write a song around this structure? I came in with some chords on my hollow body electric and Mike a little flute flourish, while Thomas held it all together with a delicate beat and accented cymbal placement within the progression. Then Mike would come in on his bass guitar and a backdrop melodic which followed the organ phrases. I didn't know if my chord strums by themselves should repeat the pattern, so I added picked arpeggios as a textured variation. Fortunately, when I advised Mike to adjust the bass line at a higher octave and Thomas to hold back a bit on the bass drums, they altered their contributions, and altogether the song became more interesting and complex. What sustained everything and kept the mood was the organ motif, which provided an urgent build-up to the chorus and hook. After half an hour of this, we broke for tea and cigarettes, and I told Thomas I wanted him to revise some lyrics I had in my collection that I wanted to apply to the next song. He looked through several of my ideas and decided on one set of lyrics about the sunrise, and decided to refine the philosophical theme of the song to reflect some current worldwide events. He thought this would indeed fit the melody and chord changes of the song that we had been creating. Back into practicing, Thomas kept overly pounding the bass drums to the point where I had to say, "Easy now, too loud." Mike got it and varied the bass approach. And the organ riff added a new embellishment, which put me off a little bit as I was trying to sing, so it sort of got in the way. Mike wanted to become more prominent in the mix, taking the lead vocals on the second verse, and I chimed in, which added to the harmonizing. There was a lift with the hook. The outro was clumsy, though. Even so, altogether it was really shaping up to a fine new tune. Taking the bus back to my home now, I thought of my girlfriend, Olga, wondering if we'd meet up for lunch. She hadn't called in a few weeks, and I thought it was her university courses that were occupying her time. Who knows? She was involved in extracurricular clubs as well, so it looked like I was no longer the central focus of her life. I rang her up at home. She agreed to meet at our local Dryden Lane pub. She had shepherd's pie and I fish and chips. It was a big establishment with seating for about 3 dozen people and a stage for live music, and of course a big bar, almost American style. There were photos of current and 1950s actors and pop stars on the wall, and even a psychedelic Be In poster above the whiskey shelf. "So, how things with the band?" she asked. "Oh, not bad, we're getting better," I replied. She was a beautiful girl, the daughter of a Polish mother and an English father, limpid green eyes and reddish blonde hair with a petite figure onto which almost any fashion looked adorable. Rather subdued in personality, you'd think she was aloof, but she was just hesitant and really shy. Not a jolly, warm, typical English girl from these parts. She possibly had pretensions to be a great intellectual as she was studying classics and had ambitions to be a professor. Occasionally she'd puff a joint, but usually she was a slow drinker, and she could hold her booze, though after too many she'd become rude and condescending. That was the flip side of her apparently sweet, mild personality. I didn't know if I'd ever marry her. I don't think she'd want to, and we never discussed it. Once in a while, I stayed overnight at her student apartment in the university town where she lived during the week, though on certain weekends she'd make an excuse that she'd need to stay to research at the school's library and not visit her parents' house in our small town. We spent a lot of time listening to records, drinking cheap wine, and lying in bed together, but we never consummated the affair. She was saving herself, I suppose. Oh, who cares? I wasn't really heartbroken during our stagnant relationship, which seemed ultimately to be going nowhere, and she had a rather princess-like ego, which made it difficult to really get close emotionally. There were plenty of other girls, and life was opening up for me and others with an increasingly liberal sexual attitude in England. Hey, I was a singer in a pretty good band, and not exactly mobbed by female fans, but I was well known and popular. Okay, that's first chapter of Land, Mind, Sky, the diary of a progressive rock musician.